You're listening to The Rich Life Revolution with me, Michelle Cooper. My mission is to empower you to step into your next level of wealthy. You'll hear all the deets, a little bit of inspiration, and real life takeaways so that you can create your own rich life revolution. Let's dig in. Hey everyone, welcome to The Rich Life Revolution. I'm your host, Michelle Cooper. Welcome to episode 26 with Marie Elizabeth Molly. Today, we are diving in to discovering how to give yourself space to create the life you want with Marie Elizabeth, who is an incredible speaker, coach, consultant, and host of the Passion Body Passage podcast. She is so familiar with her deeper self and the universe, alerting her that it's time for a change. Her journey has always taken her within the realm of helping others, but this calling has manifested in different ways throughout the past 30 years. I have spent time with Marie Elizabeth in person. She is an incredibly rounded individual and such an amazing poet. She blew my mind, quite honestly. Her poetry was so moving, and the way she presented the spoken word was touching and incredible. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about discovering how to give yourself that space, how to create the life that you want, which is what we're doing in Rich Life Revolution. Because unlike our parents' and grandparents' generations, today, many of us realize 5, 10, 15, 25 years into our first career that it just isn't fulfilling. Or maybe it never was. And people can call that, they can label that a midlife crisis, a quarter life crisis, whatever you want to call it. But it's an awareness. Now we have what some people may call the luxury of saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something that fulfills me, that lights me up. And in some parts of the world, that is a luxury because you don't get to do that. You just got to do what you got to do to make ends meet. But today we're going to be talking to Marie Elizabeth, who helps women at the midpoint of their lives better come to terms with and manifest what they really truly desire. And as she says, it's a scary thing to shake up what you know and how you know how to do it. So let's dive into this episode. There is a lot going on in this conversation, and I can't wait to hear your feedback. Hey everyone, today I am welcoming my amazing friend, Marie Elizabeth. I am so excited to talk to you, Marie Elizabeth. The work that you're doing is phenomenal. The shifts that you're making are so inspirational, and you are one of my favorite people in the world, gotta say.
Oh, thank you. Back at you on all fronts.
And we haven't known each other that long, right? But I've had the blessing of being invited to your home for dinner in Cabo and meeting your little doggies and experiencing your amazing husband. And of course, your poetry. I cannot move forward without acknowledging the amazing poet that you are. And the spoken word that you provided us that evening was so incredibly impactful. So thank you for blessing the world.
That is so lovely to hear. Thank you so much. I loved that night. That was such a special dinner.
It was so good. So we're going to dive in here. I am super excited. In fact, if somebody had been eavesdropping on our little pre-recording session, they would have heard a lot of stuff going on. And you were like, we have to hit record because I jumped in there really quickly.
This is so juicy. I don't want them to miss it.
I know, right? So let's start by, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your life, what's going on in your world and your story? I want everybody to know all about you.
So I've been involved in the healthcare, wellness, healing, coaching space for over 30 years. And I have a master's in traditional Chinese medicine. I used to do acupuncture and herbs. And then I stopped patient care 20 years ago when I realized I was starting to burn out And I also really wanted to step out of the medical model that has it be that people feel they're broken and I'm supposed to fix. I just no longer really wanted to participate in that structure. And that's when I shifted to coaching. And then I realized what was really calling me was to write. And so in 2004, that's when I closed my doors and 100% shifted to writing, went back to school, got an MFA in poetry, and spent 10 years primarily writing. And then after my marriage ended in 2012, I basically flailed for a few years. And then I realized, I've always had this clarity and direction and purpose around what I'm here to do in the world. Like that's been clear since I was 17, even though the form has changed. The through line is the same. And the one area that's been super sticky for me has been relationships. So in 2014, I began a coaching program around relationships and sexuality. I went into the program thinking I was doing it for me. And then while I was in the program, I was like, oh man, I love coaching. I'd forgotten how much I love coaching. And so in 2015, I started coaching clients around relationships and sex. And I did that for the past 8 years. And then in 2022, toward the end, about a year ago, I started feeling, and you know this feeling, and I want us to unpack this feeling because I know a lot of people feel this feeling, and you and I are two women who have the guts to follow it. But what started to happen was like, this isn't really aligned for me anymore. I'm fascinated by human relating, by what makes us tick. And what's a deeper thing that's more interesting to me is what our relationships reveal to us about ourselves. And how do we develop and deepen our relationships with ourselves so that we stay aligned and we're doing what feels right to us and we're showing up with other people and like we're not being an asshole. Like we can show up with people. I don't want to say as our best selves because I really believe in showing up as our whole selves, not just this tiny little slice that we think is acceptable. So all this year in 2023, I know this is going to air in early 24, but all this year I've been incubating this new work that started speaking to me and calling to me that's really about facilitating this moment in midlife women where what they've been doing no longer fits. Maybe they've been caring for everybody else or they've been working really hard to get ahead. And all of a sudden it's like, hang on, what about me? And what lights me up? Like I'm good at taking care of everybody and making everybody feel good and doing what's right. But I'm not sure it's really what I want. And that moment is such a crucial moment in a woman's life. And that's the moment that I want to unpack and open and dive into with women so that the next half of life, they move forward lit up and turned on and aligned with who they actually are, not who they were taught to be.
Right. I love that so much. And like you said, we have both been there. And I don't think this is like a midlife crisis or like some things that people will label it. Like to me, in my own experience, I can only speak for myself, but it was like an evolution of myself.
Yes. And when you listen in the way that you're doing and the way that I've been doing, when you listen to those glimmers of discontent, like when you're actually willing to sit down and listen to yourself, it doesn't have to become a crisis. We can actually evolve in concert with what our desire is versus waiting for a crisis to then have to like, I gotta change.
Right? Because like, if you don't listen, what do they say? Like eventually the universe will hit you over the head with a 2x4, right? And I definitely had aspects of that where it's like, it feels a little bit scary. I remember probably a solid like 3-4 years ago. So 2018, my husband and I split apart and we had to navigate this, situation, right? He moved back to the UK. My son went to live with him. My girls were here. It was this whole thing. My kids were teenagers, so it wasn't like they were little. It was hard, but all of a sudden I was like, oh, well, who am I? If I'm not this married person, like, I don't know, who am I? And just before that, 2015, I had played highly competitive roller derby for 10 years. And that was a huge part of my identity. And then I broke my leg and my ankle, and that identity was gone overnight. Like, who am I now? I'm not this roller derby player. I'm not this team member. I'm not this coach. I'm just this blob. I felt like a blob sitting on the couch watching TV, right? And so our identities they get wrapped up in stuff, and then something happens, right? Like this thing that happens, and we can look at it as a transitional or transformational moment. I think a lot of times we attach a negative meaning to it, like it's a disaster or it's a, whatever. But for me, it was like these solid things that were happening. And then I was like, okay, I'm now 50. Who am I now? And then last year in June, my divorce was finalized. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, so now I'm officially single. My kids are all grown up. None of them were in school. Like, they're in university, but they're doing their own thing. Who am I now? And what do I want? What do I want to be? And it was kind of like, oh, this is a lot. Like, this is a lot to think about. And for me, this is part of bringing your rich life to the world, because it's not just about, like, I don't know, fancy cars or, flying business class or whatever, right? It's about what feels like your rich experience of life.
Yes. And that experiential wisdom that's come from living and responding to life.
Yeah. And I remember being at your house, and just a lot of the past couple of years has been spent trying to be the observer. So just being in a room and watching, instead of like always talking and making noise and doing, right? It's like, I'm just going to lean back and observe. And I remember observing you and your husband and your interactions and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's an example of a relationship I've never seen before.
Wow. Say more. I'm curious.
Yeah, because I was like, Patrick he's independent in his space, like he's not like hanging on you. He's not like telling you what to do or whatever, right? And I really didn't know that it was possible to be in a relationship with a man where he could just be his own individual self in a room with a bunch of people.
Exactly. Wow. What a beautiful reflection, because that's one of the things I love about our relationship, is that we each give each other a lot of room to be ourselves. And we come together and we love each other, but there isn't this, I feel like in a lot of relationships, I'm going to say something potentially confronting, but what passes for love in a lot of relationships is actually control. Like, I will love you if you do what I want, if you behave like I want,
if you look like I want,
if you look like I want, if you make bank like I want. And so we've actually created a relationship that we give each other a lot of room to be ourselves. And if stuff rubs us the wrong way, we talk it out. But I'm interested, and he's interested for me, in our evolution as people. Like, we're interested in each other as growing humans. And I mean, this is the first time I'm in a relationship like this too. And it is such a relief, because as a person who's always growing and who's also introverted, and I need my own space, he happens to be introverted too, but he's really one of the first people I've been in relationship with who doesn't just suck all the air out of the room. My field, my energetic space can be in the same room with his energetic space and not get swallowed up. And that's a really new experience. And it has to do with, well, we both met in a personal growth kind of community. So we both have done some work, and we're really committed to our own and each other's evolution over comfort. Now, it's not to say we're not comfortable, we are, but we're willing to get uncomfortable in the service of truth. which is a particular stance that I realize not everybody shares.
So good. And like, I think there's so many women, especially my listeners, because your demographic is totally the Rich Life Revolution demographic of women coming into the space and questioning, what am I doing? Like, whose life am I living? What do I want? Do I even know who I am? Do I know what I like anymore?
Yes, this is exactly who I love to serve. Yeah.
Totally. Like, do I even know what's possible for me?
Exactly. And especially if you've only experienced or seen a one way of doing things, if you had parents who are very traditional, like the way I live is not like my parents. My father had one profession his whole life. And he actually cautioned, he saw at a young age that I was this multi-passionate person who had a lot of interests. And he cautioned me against that. And he kept trying to steer me to a more traditional route. So I went to Chinese medicine school. He was like, you should go to medical school. And before that, when I went to massage school, he was like, you should go to physical therapy school. It's more respected. And I'm like, but I don't want to work in a hospital. I'm interested in wellness. And so, but this constant having to push back against him while he was alive, he died in 2000, so 23 years ago. But having to push back against him constantly really helped me hone a kind of strength around, I know this is what's right for me, even if this doesn't make sense to anybody else.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like similar to you, my dad, I came from a commercial fishing family and my dad didn't want that for me. And so it's like, well, you're going to go do this thing. And I was really good with numbers. I always say, like, I should have been a numerologist, not an accountant.
It's not too late.
I know, right? But I did conform. I did go that path, almost like, I wouldn't say it was the path of least resistance. It was like the path of least arguments kind of thing, right? My brothers were really adamant that, I would have a professional career. So was my dad. So that's what I did. And I don't regret it. I don't think anything happens, it's like it's wrong. I never really felt like it was the thing. Like I was always on the outside of wherever I was working or whatever career I was in. Something I didn't quite fit in the box, right? And even in building my business is 13 years old now, and it's great. I love it. It totally serves a purpose. It serves a client who really feels misunderstood in the world, feels intimidated by, traditional numbers people, accountants, that kind of thing. And it really supports them in a non-judgmental way, which I think is very important around money, but it's not what I want to do. It's like, yes, I built this. I have a great team. They're running it. It's awesome. I'll still put people in there if that's the service they need. But that's not what I want to do. But that's a scary thing.
It really is. And I feel like, tell me if this is true for you, I feel like when that awareness arises, like, oh shit, this isn't the thing. It's useful for me. That was relationship coaching. Like, it's useful. It serves a need. People need to learn how to communicate and relate with more skill because we're not taught how to do that. And most of us had parents that didn't do it well, except the younger generation, because a lot of our generation, I'm 56 now, so it's like a lot of our generation did a lot of work. And so the kids growing up now, I feel have so much more emotional intelligence than our generation started off with. That said, they're now grappling with social media and so much more porn. Like, we didn't have to deal with all this stuff it's different stuff that's messing up their relationships than our relationships. But there was always this feeling of, for me, okay, I this is good work. It's necessary work. And it's not quite the thing. It's not the spot. Like, I could keep doing this, but with each passing year, it just felt harder and harder for me to stay engaged with it. And so then sales got harder because my heart wasn't in it. And all of a sudden I'm trying to launch a program and it's not flying, and I have to grapple with, oh, it's not like, this is for me. This is happening for me. The fact that this, someone coached me to make a year-long program. So I made a year-long program and only got 2 people in it. And by month 3, I dreaded showing up to the calls. I was like, this is not the thing. And so I went to them and I actually I gave them the rest of the year as private clients. I was just like, this is not it. And I'm more interested in your individual journey. And so I went back to one-on-one because it is my home base and it is what I love because I can go so deep. And that worked great. And they came to my January retreat because that was included in their year, because I do women's retreats at the house in Cabo that you've been to. And they had a great experience. So, it all worked out. But that was really the start of my reckoning. And it's scary to shake up the thing that you've been doing and that you know how to do and that you've been focused on and you've been trained to do. But I really feel, again, coming back to discontent, I think it's an invitation. I think discontent at that level, when you're serving at a high level and that voice starts, for me, it's a voice. Maybe for somebody else, it's a physical sensation, whatever it is. That starts happening. I have learned to slow way down, kind of like what you were saying, like listen, slow, observe, slow way down. And open that permission to let what's true now and what wants to happen now emerge. And that's really, there were so many times in the past year that I wanted to start launching my new passion body work, and it wasn't time yet. And I've released this beautiful 5-episode opt-in private podcast that's all about this moment in a woman's life. And I've created these archetypes. And, it's a really beautifully fleshed out body of work because I allowed myself the time. And had I put out the podcast in June as planned, I would have missed the download that didn't arrive till August. And I would have had to re-record a bunch of stuff that was already out there. It would have been a nightmare. But instead, I was able to re-record it before I ever released it so I could send it out right the first time, and I released it in September. So it's, it just has taken a long time.
Yeah, it's such a great example of like, there's your plan and then it's the universe's plan and your timeline and the universe's timeline, and they don't often match, right? And we can get really stressed because we think this thing isn't happening. Or in my business, we've seen I wouldn't say probably, a significant number of clients transitioning out of our services into different forms. So like a bunch of really high level clients wanting to hire an internal bookkeeper and accountant and having us train that person and create the SOPs and stuff. So it's not like they're necessarily like unhappy. They've just decided to pivot slightly in their business, right? So that's had an impact on us. Then we've had, it's just the economy, right? Like people are having to make tough choices. So it's like, I can't afford this. If you can do it cheaper, I can stay with you. I'm like, we're not the Walmart. So it's just that's not us. We're not the Tiffany's, but we're not the Walmart. And so, you have to bless and release and let people go and do their own thing and always have the door open if they want to come back. But it's a shift in the business, which could look like less revenue, definitely opening up lots of room for different things to come in and stuff like that. And my experience of it is like, well, this wasn't the timeline I had planned. And I'm like, whoa, like this is happening too fast. Like, and then, a bunch of stuff happened. I was just recently away in Kenya and, there was all this stuff happening. I had like no coverage. I'm in the middle of like a game reserve in nowhere. And I'm getting texts from my team and they're panicking and stuff. And I'm like, can't actually do anything right now. And I got all up in my head about it. And then I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. What can I do? I'm in the middle of Africa.
Right. Like it is what it is.
I hired you. I trust you. Make whatever decision you're going to make. I don't know what to tell you. I'm here for another I don't know, 5 days or whatever, it'll all be fine. The timeline is different than I thought it would be. And it always has been. The things happen differently, right, than you imagine.
And sometimes they happen slower and sometimes they happen faster, right? It's like it's not always one way or the other. So again, how do we stay open? How do we listen? How do we surrender our timeline, trusting that there's larger forces at work that are actually on our side?
Yeah. I remember a friend of mine and a mentor, she used to say, the universe is working harder for you than you ever could, Michelle. So just relax. And so even in my own situation now, right, like there's work that I want to do that I feel called to do in this world. There's a new energy within me that got unlocked in Kenya, this very feminine, surrendery kind of energy. And I'm playing with that. I'm exploring that. I don't know what to do right now. And I have to be okay with that. It's not like my coach is like, okay, so we need some cash, so we're going to go out there and get some clients. I'm like, that makes me feel like not uncomfortable. Like it's not the right time. It's like, but you need money, Michelle. Like you're telling me you don't have enough money. You need money, so got to get some clients. I know I can manifest clients like that if I want to, but it doesn't feel right, which is similar to what you said about the whole podcast thing. So that timeline piece, I think, is a really important consideration because we can get into panicky energy that something needs to be happening now.
And usually what we create from that space has that energy in it. And it's like a friction that gets created that is not ideal.
Yeah, like I call it static.
Yes, like static friction. It's that thing of like, oh, it's not, whereas, I mean, for example, here's an example of the opposite. So we're both speaking right now a lot to what's hard, what the difficult part. And I want to just share an example of the magical part that opens up.
I love the magical part.
I know, I love the magical part. So I was recently in New York I'm in a documentary that just premiered in October about my speaker coach's work with several speakers, and it premiered at the Chelsea Film Festival. So I have an apartment in New York, in Brooklyn. And so I was there for the first time in months, and I come out of my apartment and a little dog runs up to me and it's like, hi. And I'm like, oh, who are you? I've never seen this dog before, right? So I'm like, oh, who are you? And I start chatting with the dog's mom, who moved in 2 doors from me 2 months ago. And she's in a transition herself. She's getting divorced. She's our age. And we end up having this wonderful conversation. And then it kind of comes to like, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I coach midlife women. She's like, really? Let's talk, right? So we ended up getting together for tea the next day and had this whole conversation. And she ended up joining my community. So I have a community called the Passion Body Hub. And I can speak a bit about what the Passion Body is in a sec. But if I had left my apartment a minute earlier or a minute later, I would have missed the dog and the mom coming back from the walk. And we never would have made this connection, and she wouldn't have joined my community. And it's exactly what she needs to support her at this moment in time. And that's the kind of magic that happens when you slow down enough to listen. I thought I was leaving the house late because I was trying to get to pick up dinner to get back for a session I was doing. And I thought I was behind schedule, but I was right on time because, clearly I had to walk out my door right at that moment. And so I feel like because I'm willing to listen, because I'm willing to slow down and be in the not knowing and sit in the dark for months and months and months. I mean, a lot of people avoid that, and with good reason. Like, it's not fun, but I mean, it's that willingness to sit in the not knowing and to sit in the, when am I going to get clear? I don't know. Where's the insight? Like, tell me what to do. Come on, to be willing to sit there and wait for the thing to drop in and the signal like, okay, go, like now go. And all of a sudden there's been this now go in the last month that feels so different. And it would have been completely otherwise had I pushed it and created from panic and like, I have to get clients, I have to do this. I have months of no revenue. I mean, I'm going to have a loss this year. It's just what it is because I've been pivoting and I accept that. But I am poised the whole, like, even just getting this new energy medicine piece. So that's another magical thing. Someone I was talking with was like, you should go to JJ Virgin's Mindshare Leadership Summit, Mindshare Collaborative Leadership Summit. It's for healthcare practitioners. And I'm no longer licensed, but I'm still in the wellness space. I'm in, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness. And I discovered this energy medicine system there that I'm now bringing into my practice that's rounding out my body of work and bringing back this part of me that I left when I stopped patient care 20 years ago. And I wouldn't have found that system and brought it into my practice had I had that person not told me to go to that conference, etc. Like, it's just, you have to listen.
You have to listen. And, it's Steve Jobs, right? He's the one who said, you can only connect the dots looking back. You can't connect them looking forward. It's only when you look back and you reflect that you connect all the dots. And the dots to me are like, they can be completely random. Really? You wouldn't even think these things are connected. Just to share, a similar story, because I want to really bring forward, it's not all the pain and suffering of all the stuff, right? It is the joy of the transformation of our life and the transition that we go into. I think especially into that midlife period where if we can really lean in and do the work on ourselves, it can be so powerful, right? It's like that, I don't love this word, the crone energy, but it is that, right? Like it totally is that.
Yes, I prefer wise woman to crone.
Wise woman energy, totally. And for me, we're in a mastermind together. One of the things we do is our constellation map, right, of the different areas that we're working on. And last year I put like, I'm open to relationship. I'm not dying for a relationship, but it's there. But I'm very particular about what it would look like, right? And then I was in Croatia in August, and that was awesome. And so many of the women on my trip were like, are you dating anyone? Are you in a relationship? I'm like, no. Are you close to that? Are you open? I was like, I'm totally open. I'm just not pursuing, but I'm totally open.
Which is such a great space to be in.
Totally, right? Because I know that the words that we speak out loud are so important. So I'm not going to say I'm not open or I'm closed. I'm open to it. I'm not like on dating apps and stuff like that, but I'm open to it, right? Then a client and friend of mine goes down to Costa Rica. I happen to be a huge Cesar Millan fan. He is like, I love him to death, right? And she's down at Rhythmia doing some plant medicine. And she sends me a picture of her and Cesar Millan. So he's on the board of directors of Rhythmia. And she's like standing there with Cesar. She's like, I know that you would love this. I'm like, oh my God, where do I need to go? Like, what is happening right now? Because one of my dreams is to go to the dog psychology center, just to go and watch him and be in his energy. But fast forward, I'm in Kenya. I'm standing there getting ready to go out on a game drive. And I hear this voice and I'm like, Cesar Millan.
Get out.
I turn around and it's not Cesar Millan, but it's this man and he has the same accent, the same voice. I'm like, oh my God, you sound like Cesar Millan. And he's like, oh my God, your eyes. And then we just stand there staring at each other. And then this other guy I know, Lee, he's like, I'm not sure what's happening right now. And I'm like, neither am I. This is weird.
But it feels good.
Yeah, totally. Right. So like you connect these little dots, right? Now, the friendship that I've created with this guy and the whatever relationship that is there has unlocked something in me that I am not familiar with, which is feminine energy.
I love that.
And now I'm just playing with that energy. I'm like, oh, I'm like the master doer, right? Like I'm like your stereotypical generator. I can overdo, I can overwork, I can do all those things. I'm really good at being in my masculine energy because I've had to. I've learned now that I've had to.
It's an adaptation that most women do.
Yeah. The men in my life didn't show up in masculine energy. And so I had to put my pants on kind of thing and get shit done or whatever. So this is different. But those dots, connecting those dots backwards, they're very random things. But when you connect them, they all make sense. And it's like, oh, I wonder if I hadn't seen Deb's picture of her and Cesar Millan, and would that even have been on my mind? Like I just would have heard somebody talking and moved along. Just so interesting how these things work.
Yeah, I do feel like there's so much more magic underfoot than we realize at any given time. And it takes slowing down, and it takes a certain level of surrender. I mean, we're in these female bodies, and many of us have been forced in a certain way to be masculinized, to get ahead, to do the thing, to own a business. And for many of us, it's this journey that you're describing of how do I lean back more? How do I receive? I mean, receiving is one of the core things that the women who come to my retreats are working on. And this is why I set my retreats up in the way that I do. Like, they get picked up at the airport, and the moment they get dropped off at the end, everything is taken care of. And the food is exquisite, and there's time off to just be in the pool, and there's work time, and there's rest time, and there's plenty. It's spacious. And there's this beautiful teaching that I'm not talking, but being, because I'm a gracious receiver. I've learned to exquisitely receive in a way that it feels really good for other people to give to me, to do stuff for me. And so, like, they're watching me as we go, a couple of the nights we go out to eat, and very often I know either the chef or the owner of the restaurant or the hostess or whoever, and there's an imprint happening. I'm not directly teaching, like, look at what I'm doing now, how I'm talking to the people. They just see me in action, and it's like, oh. And this thing gets encoded and imprinted, this possibility of being a gracious receiver, which I think that's really all life is asking of us a lot of the time, is to more graciously receive the incredible gifts that are being showered on us, which is not to say it's not hard. Like, I mean, you broke your leg. I could not walk for 5 years. Like, I had chronic pain for 10 years, and I had to replace both my hips at 50 years old because I could barely walk for 5 years, and I moved to California so I could drive because I could no longer make it to the subway from my home in Brooklyn, right? So, like, it's not to say that challenge doesn't happen, difficulty doesn't happen, but it is to say that for me, in the years that I couldn't walk, I learned to ask for help because I was fiercely independent and I did everything myself. I was heavily in my masculine, and all of a sudden I'm in a position where I actually need people to help me, which is excruciating and humbling when you're used to doing everything by yourself. But what a gift. And I learned that, oh, people actually are amazing and want to help. And it's just a beautiful cycle that gets opened up when we allow ourselves to receive and to not have to always be in the driver's seat, but recognize that there is something bigger holding us and supporting us and moving through our lives. And we can open more to that and be more aligned with who we actually are versus this shell that we were forced to make to survive.
Right. Based on trauma, wounding, conditioning, programming, all of that.
All of that. I call that the pretty body. So the pretty body is like when we're younger, we trade on that currency a lot. I mean, we're taught to look a certain way and to be a certain way and to be appropriate and do things right. And then there comes this moment, typically in midlife, where it's like, fuck that. Like, and it's like, what do I want? Like you've said so beautifully. And that's the moment where it's time to activate what I call the passion body, which is, it's like our inner compass. And it sits for me very close to the soul. It's like the deepest truth of our being and what lights us up and what we want and what we're here to give and what we're here to receive and who we're here to be in the unconditioned, in other words, not the pretty body self, but the passion body self. And then as we get into our later years, like our super wise women years, then it's really about, okay, how do I, maybe it's not as fiery or as passion driven at that point. Maybe at that point it's more like, oh, how do I embrace my radiant body? How do I live in radiance? You know, this is like over 60, right? I'm talking like 65, 70, 80. How do I actually rest in a place of radiance? Because I'm so connected to the truth of who I am. And who I am is one with all this, like this bigger thing. And that's ultimately a radiant endeavor, you know. So this is the trajectory that I see us moving on as women when we unplug from the prevailing paradigm that aging means we get invisible and disappear and wither and die. And I'm redefining that for us.
Amen, sister. Like, redefine that. Like, my whole thing has been for the past couple of years, I want to age well. My younger years, like teens and 20s, were really focused around my physical appearance, right? And being thin and strong and all the things, right? And pretty and all this stuff. And then, you know, I had kids, and then it became about the kids. Didn't care about myself. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about them. And your body changes. You know, then in my turning 50 and in my 50s, it's been about like, okay, well, how can I not focus on, like, say, weight or size, but like aging well? Like, what does that mean to me?
Yeah, it's like, how do I optimize the system to work well?
We have, you know, our mutual friend Yannick, he talks about living to 108 or whatever it is he's going to live to. And I'm like, oh, God, that seems like a long time. And I don't know what state my body would be in. But now I'm like, yeah, I could do that, because I'm really focused on optimal health for me in this moment, whatever that looks like.
That's exactly it. I love how you put that. That's exactly it. And I feel the same way. I'm not attached to an age. Oh, I want to live to a certain age. I want to have my body function optimally for as long as possible. And when it doesn't, then we'll have that conversation of what I'm going to do at that point. But, you know, until that point, I'm going to do what it takes to optimize this thing. I mean, I have a hyperbaric chamber, and I know some of what I'm talking about. You got to have money to do. And so I'm sensitive to that. But even someone that doesn't have the kind of disposable income I have, there's things we can do. We can walk. Walking is free. We can eat vegetables, make sure we get some vegetables each day. Like, there's things we can do that don't cost a lot of money. And those of us that do have more money, it's more accessible to us, like biohacking type stuff, a lot of which I do.
Totally. And I think that's a really good reason to manifest more money into your life.
100%. Yeah.
To look after yourself and those that you care about in whatever that shows up in. Really quickly, because you touched on this, and it's kind of sitting in my head that I want to make sure people like really heard. What I loved about what you said about the work that you do with your clients when they come to your house in Cabo for the retreat and stuff, and it's like who you're being, right? It's not about you talking at people. It's not about the content. It's not about filling people's heads. And I think I spent a lot of years thinking I had to jam as much information into my brain as possible. And a lot of that was really necessary and useful, right? I had to change my thinking and upgrade my knowledge. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that. that go to something or do something, and it's like, I need more information. I need more strategy. I need more things to learn and books to read and stuff to do. And what you described and what I witnessed when I was at your house just for a dinner was a beingness. And I always talk to people about, like, it's not what you're doing, it's who you're being when you're doing the doing, right? And then you can have whatever it is you want to have. And so I love that you said that, because so many times as well, people will stop themselves from bringing their work out into the world, whatever that is, because they think that they don't know enough, or they don't have enough content, or I need all this stuff. And it's like, it's actually not about that. It's actually about who you're being. And you're such a great example of that, because what you and Patrick showed me, and you didn't even know you were doing it, was a possibility. It was a different experience than I had known, right? It was like, oh, look at that. That's interesting. I've never seen that before. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. I love that that is how you're looking at your work, because it's so, so powerful.
It's a transmission. I really believe, and this is not to say that I don't have the knowledge. Like, I have studied, I have a shit ton of tools in my toolbox because I've studied all the things for over 30 years and practiced all the things for over 30 years. However, I'm very clear that it's a transmission. And so there's a balance of the words people need to hear to shift how they see things and think, and the vibe that they get to absorb. For me, it's a both and. And I do another one of the tools in the toolbox is this work called Summit Transformation, which is all about aligning our subconscious minds with our conscious goals. And it's very practical. Like, you take a goal and muscle test it, and it usually tests weak because your subconscious doesn't actually believe that it's going to happen. Like, you want it consciously, but your subconscious doesn't really want to change, and it's comfortable with what it knows, even if what it knows is shitty, and it would just rather stay there because change is scary. So there are these exercises we do that then that goal tests strong. So now you've built the neural pathway to the goal, and then you create an action plan. So there is a kind of masculine structure as part of what I do. But then there's this large part that's more the feminine, the being, the receiving, the opening, the allowing, that for those of us growing up in the West is kind of the weaker muscle for many of us. And that's where I think the real transformation lies, is learning to trust that. I think we grip to knowledge because we don't trust our beingness. We don't trust that we're enough as we are. We don't trust that we're worthy and lovable just as we are. Like, oh, if I just know all these things, then I'll be worthy. Then the goodness will come to me. It's like, no, you're worthy now. And let's figure out what's in the way of actually embodying and knowing that. So that's where some of this more left brain kind of exercise stuff, belief shifting happens. And then simultaneously, and also the action plan, because you don't just sit on your ass and wait for the universe to hand you shit, because that doesn't work that way either. You actually have to show up and do things.
Inspired action,
but action aligned with the truth of your being. And that's how you know that you're actually going after something that's really aligned for you, and not just chasing something that somebody else told you should want.
Yeah, because that can happen. That happened to me a couple of years ago, right? I got all kind of pulled into it was probably at 5 years in a row of being pulled into other people's communities and world. And all of a sudden, the things that they cared about, I seemed to think I should care about. And so I tried to care about, but I didn't really care about. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is not me, right? So yeah, like being in alignment with what matters to you, your authentic self, that congruence between your subconscious and your conscious. Like, often people will say like, well, this is all great, Michelle, and you manifest your amazing life, but like, I'm not manifesting what I desire. Why is that? Simple. Your subconscious is not in alignment with your conscious.
You're manifesting what your subconscious desires.
Always manifesting what your subconscious desires. And so you got to bring your conscious mind.
Which is not to shame or blame anyone, myself included, when something happens that feels terrible. It's not like, because I feel like there can be this kind of shaming energy around like, well, you must have wanted it. And it's like, well, no, I did not want, I'm just going to make something up. Like, no, I didn't want to get in a car wreck and have my face sliced open. Like, no. And that's what happened, right? And there's also this karmic piece that's out of our control. I mean, there's just many forces, I think, at work that is beyond our control. And so I think a lot of life and a lot of manifestation is learning. This is in the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, it's been thousands of years in scripture to take inspired action. I love that phrase. To act in the direction of your desire and your, put what you want out into the world, but you surrender the result. You have to surrender the result because it's bigger than you, this universe thing. So it's like, it's not like, I don't know, I think sometimes when I hear people talk about this stuff, it's as if we sort of hold the puppet strings of the whole universe. And I'm like, dude, no, it's like, it's learning to respond graciously to whatever is showing up and then pivot and adjust and adjust and adjust. But this is scripture.
Well, and what do people say? Like, man plans and God laughs or something like that, right? Like that. That's why I'm always like, I used to love to plan. I kind of now have thrown planning out the window. I'm like, just, I don't know, not really working for me anymore. But this is amazing. If people want to spend more time with you, they want to get to know you and your work and all that you do, where do they find you? How can they hang out with you?
Well, as of now, and even if the URL has changed, everything will still work. But my website is relationshipalchemy.com. And a great place to start is to take, if you are a woman, and ideally around midlife, is to take my grown-ass power quiz. It's a really fun quiz that gives you your passion body archetype. And it's like, what's your strength? And also, where are the potential pitfalls? So you can find that right on the homepage. And it's there's a button right there at the top. And that's a really great place to start. The other place to start, if you'd rather go straight to the 5-episode podcast, you can go to passionbodypassage.com. And that's this 5-episode podcast that unpacks the archetypes a bit more, talks a bit more about this moment in a woman's life where it's like, whoa, what about me? And what do I want? And how do I learn to align my activities with nature so that I'm not just push all the time, but I'm actually active when it's natural to be active and allowing myself more rest when nature is resting. We're not designed to push all the time. And we're so misaligned in that way in the West. So part of it is based in Chinese medicine, this rhythm, learning to align your rhythm with the rhythm of nature, which then has you have more vitality and energy when it is time to move fast. Yeah. So those are a couple places to start.
So I'm going to put all those links in the show notes and stuff like that. I'm going to go do that quiz right now.
Oh, goody. I can't wait to see your archetype.
Yeah, that's like super exciting. I love a quiz. I love archetype. But what you were talking about does remind me of a really amazing book. It's called The Seasonal Soul. But it is a phenomenal book. And it really helped me understand this idea of like, it's not go, 24/7, 365. I was like, oh, there's seasons to our lives. There's seasons to our months. There's seasons to our days. And it helps you identify what season you are in and how to move forward. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I love this episode. We might need to do another one because I think there's more to talk about.
Always.
Maybe I need to fly down to Cabo and we'll do like a real life what.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. We should totally do that, like walking on the beach or something.
Oh my God. So good. So good. All right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. What about socials? Can they find you online?
Yes. So Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn are all at Relationship Alchemy, MEM. Again, those may change between now and when this airs because I'm in this transition to Passion Body. Another option would be actually, you could just input my name, Marie Elizabeth Molly, no hyphen, just marieelizabethmolly.com. I have a basic landing page there, and that's always going to have the most current information. So if you go to my socials and they've changed, you can always go to marieelizabethmolly.com, and that'll point you toward everything. So those are the best. I am on TikTok as well right now with the same handle. So yeah, I'm in all the places. YouTube, I have a YouTube channel with so for the past 2 years, I've been doing this Relationship Alchemy podcast, which is actually I decided to sunset that. That was one of the huge loves of mine, which I loved doing and was a beautiful service that was no longer aligned. So I ended it. But the podcasts, the episodes can be found through my website or on YouTube. If you just go to Marie Elizabeth Molly on YouTube, you'll find all the things there as well. So there's lots of, if you're a listener and you want to learn how to relate better, I got you. There's a ton of stuff there for you. And if you're in this transitional moment where you're really trying to figure out who you are and what you want now, the hub is a great place to join, but just start with the podcast or the quiz, and then we can meet each other.
Perfect. Love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. So thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I loved this conversation with Marie Elizabeth. What really struck me was how Marie Elizabeth talked about the importance of building relationships that give you room to be yourself. I hadn't really thought about that, to be honest. I think we all get into relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, whatever it is. You're on your best behavior at the beginning, and then, maybe you relax a little, you become a little bit more of yourself. But you can change along the way. And if there's no room for you to be yourself, then it can go sideways really fast. And I think that's partly what happened with my marriage, to be honest. I think that there wasn't room for either myself or my husband to be ourselves. And looking back now, things could have worked out differently if we had been aware of this. So one of the biggest assets to transforming your life is awareness, is knowing yourself and having the awareness that Marie Elizabeth talked about, room to be yourself. I would love for you to share this episode if it resonated with you. Give it a heart, give it a like, give it a review, whatever that means to you. I'd also love to hear what your biggest takeaway was. You can DM me, reach out to me, Facebook, Instagram. But I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your feedback. And I'd love to know what resonated with you. Have an amazing day and go out there and create your rich life revolution. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you got at least one gold nugget today. Be sure to grab your copy of the Rich Life Revolution workbook to help you set the foundation for your next level of wealthy. Get it now at richliferevolution.ca, and I'll see you later.